Hello and welcome to the AppleInsider Podcast. This is your host, Wes Hilliard speaking, and I'm joined once again by William Gallagher. Our sponsors this week are Oracle, Masterclass, Fast Growing Trees, and Rogue Amoeba. If you're a paid Apple Insider Plus subscriber, you're not going to be hearing anything about advertisers. You're going to be hearing us talk about the show ad-free, and at the end, Apple Insider Plus, we're going to be discussing this topic: what does a world without iPhone actually mean? What does that look like? How do we get there? And we'll get into that more in the show about why that's coming up. But William, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm actually suddenly kind of split, because part of me, my first thought, as you were saying, that was, world without an iPhone, wasteland, tundra. Is that the thing in Westerns that rolls over and sound effects of wind? But oh, that's it. Thank you. But also, I'm told there was once a world without iPhones, so some people know what that was like.
I know what that was like. I was there. It existed. But we'll get to that in a moment. First off, I want to mention another anniversary. iMac 27 years ago. I'm sitting here looking at this image of Steve Jobs holding the iMac in that iconic photo.
Yeah, but that's is that the one on his knees where I'm thinking it must be breaking his spine or something.
Are they that heavy?
Well, I think so. It's sort of so big and bulbous, and I truly believe it's the ugliest computer Apple ever made. But I stand alone on this, and like it saved the company, so I'm very alone.
People really enjoyed this. They also enjoyed the what were they called, Power Books, where they also took on that transparent plastic look. And in Legally Blonde, she carried one, and everyone made fun of her for not being serious in law school because she had a colorful Power Book. I won't call it a Power Book.
It's iBook, actually, at that time. The professional one was Power Book, consumer was iBook, and then that faded away, and Apple doesn't often do this, borrowed the term for what has now been called Apple Books. I mean, it's a complicated word, really. But funny, I liked the iBooks, and I didn't like the iMac. That's curious now I've thought about that. But I mean, I've got to be specific here. I didn't like that iMac. The next couple of generations down, where we had the kind of like a sunflower head thing moving. That was
articulating arm.
Yeah. Although I only once saw it in person, and I was shocked how big it was. It was really, really big. What you thought?
I'd never seen one of those. The iMac, I want to say G4. I'd never seen one of those before in person, but I've definitely seen plenty of these. Our local library, and I think my elementary school had some. So not specifically. Yeah, so it's weird because I went to elementary school in 95, so of course, I would have been, so by the time this came out, this is 98. So yeah. That would be right. Elementary school. I'm just trying to make sure I have my math right. So it would have been like fourth grade or something, but I've definitely seen these around. It's just very briefly, because then suddenly by like 2000, all the schools switched to those black Dell basic computers, and they all had the same computer. But very, very briefly, for whatever reason, there was a couple of iMacs floating around. Maybe there were some teachers that just really liked the idea of it. But in any way, I definitely want an iMac G3, but I want to gut it and turn it into a cat bed. So maybe I'll find one someday.
Okay. There was that old thing, wasn't it? Not with the iMac. It would have been with the Mac Classic or the actual original Mac, turning the all-in-one thing into an aquarium. That kind of thing. I remember that being done quite a bit.
I mean, that sounds interesting. It's a high-definition screensaver.
Right. Not the most productive kind of Mac afterwards, but then the original Mac, I suppose it wasn't. I've been in two minds about to tell you this, but I'm going to anyway. I've been a freelance writer since you were in school for it, but through an accounting mistake, the BBC put me on staff for a couple of days a week on a certain project, and I didn't even notice. I mean, I agreed, but there was no difference to the income. My accountant had some problems with it, but otherwise fine. But then at the end, when they were chucking people out, suddenly I got redundancy money I wasn't expecting, and I spent it on a 2012 27-inch iMac. And at that time, and for about 6-7 years, I would have said it's the best Mac I'd ever had. And the 2012 one was just before the Retina screen version came out, so it didn't even have that, but it was so, so good. I mean, now Mac Studio knocks it out, but I'm very fond of that iMac, and I thank you for the opportunity to say it since I was so critical of the original one. There, that was
well. I'm a fan of collecting older devices. I mean, I have a couple of CRT televisions in my home running old gaming consoles. Right, I have a Nintendo 64 and several of the cartridges. I have Game Boys and Game Boy cartridges and these things, and so just kind of nostalgia for that era because for me, partially it was my childhood and young adulthood and everything like that, coming up into seeing technology go from literally nothing, banging on the TV and shifting the antenna so we can watch Andy Griffith's show when I got home from school on weekdays, to iPods and iPhones in a very short amount of time. So of course I'm very in my adolescence being there for that transition, it's just very pinned in my head. Whereas I know the adults who were there at the time, right? So if you were in your if you were graduating high school or in your 20s or in your college years, and by 2000, or even older, you saw it all happen, and maybe life kept you busy enough that it was that much of an influence on you at the time. But for whatever reason, I think other people in my generation will say had a particularly strong effect on us because it's just what we used, it's what we saw, it's our education system, it was just around us, and the internet just kind of took over. And I know, today we talk about iPad kids and how children are being raised with iPads, but I don't think any generation will ever see another quite as big a transition as what we did throughout our adolescence. So I just always find it fascinating. And then in the middle of that, Apple is recovering from near bankruptcy, introducing this crazy computer design that people laughed at and calling them not serious, and then taking over the world and being where they are today. But, speaking of transitions, though, we might be on the cusp of one. Eddie Q. Now, so this quote is being a little bit misattributed in a way. I want to read the full quote. So he's at a Google briefing, and this is the same briefing. We're not going to get into it today, but he mentions that search is dropping off on Safari for Google. People are shifting to other things, which Google has now disputed, but that's a whole different topic for another day. In that same briefing, he mentions, you may not need an iPhone 10 years from now. As crazy as it sounds, the only way you truly have true competition is when you have technology shifts. Technology shifts create these opportunities. AI is a new technology shift, and it's creating new opportunities for new entrants. Now, I wanted to point out a lot of the headlines, and I think even including ours, jumped on the iPhone is you won't need an iPhone 10 years from now. But I think what he was saying is, and then because he said in the next breath AI. I don't think he was necessarily saying that AI would replace the iPhone, just that we don't know what's going to replace the iPhone in 10 years. It could just go away. It could evolve. And AI, being a transitional technology, could play a part in that. And that was more of what he was saying, not necessarily that AI will replace iPhone. And I think people jumped on that a little too harshly. Is that how you interpreted it?
Well, my first thought was we're not going to get an iPhone 30 then. That's persuasive, I think. I'm not sure. It seemed to me that there were two parts of that quote, and they were very different. The AI one was his point that he was making, and the iPhone one was the lead into it. So I agree the emphasis has been put in the wrong place. But actually, you said about Google's response. There's one thing I would like to point out about Google's response. What happened was, after he said this, because he also said that Apple was actively looking at adding search through AI instead of through Google, Google's shares dropped about 7.3%. The value went down of Alphabet by $150 billion. And the next day, Google issues a statement, but it is so terse. It's almost petty for it. They don't even give it a headline. The headline is, here's our statement. That's it. And then a little bit. And they ignore all the AI stuff. They focus on how he said that alongside all of this, one of the reasons they're looking is that search through Safari, regular search, had dropped for the first time ever in the last 2 months. And Google says, no, it doesn't. and that they've got proof that it's better than ever, and we're wonderful. And it was like didn't all the way through, and it's weird how companies can sometimes seem to have a personality and maybe not one they want, but yeah.
So the stock market's been swinging a lot on these kinds of statements. Like Apple straight up saying, an executive at Apple straight up saying, yeah, iPhone, our biggest moneymaker, not going to be a thing in 10 years. That kind of took a dive bomb yesterday, but today they've recovered by 3 points. So it's fine. The market itself is up today as we record. But this whole thing is interesting to me in two parts. So we were talking about transitional times, right? So going from no internet to internet, going from very slow, very basic home computers that could maybe run a word processor and solitaire to these graphical machines that actually could play video games at home. They were very rudimentary video games, but they could do it. A lot of transitions happened between the 90s and up to 2010 there, and we're in the middle of this iPhone moment, and now we're talking about AI. And I've been a strong critic of AI, because the way it's been presented by companies has been very exaggerated, and I still believe that to be true. There's still no evidence that this is some actual revolution. It is a great technology, but it is not like world-ending, economy-ending, globally upending technology. It's just a better hammer. So AI is definitely going to play a part in changing how our technology functions. I agree with that statement. And I just do not think that it's going to replace the iPhone. The idea that something like an AI pen will replace the iPhone. But what will replace the iPhone, Apple is actually actively building. And that's what we're going to get into in Apple Insider Plus, just teasing that there, of where I think it's going and how we could actually get rid of iPhone. But it's just an interesting statement from someone like Eddie Q, right? Like, 10 years is not that long. 10 years ago, we got the Lightning connector, 12 years ago, I guess, and they were like, yeah, it's 10 years from now, the Lightning connector will be removed, and that held true. But that wasn't that long of a time in hindsight, and now sitting here today, can you really say that 10 years from now there just won't be an iPhone?
I think there'll be a USB-F by then, but other than that, no. I keep saying it's failure of imagination on my part. That's why I talk about these things instead of making them. I can't predict where any of this stuff will go, except thinner is probably a bet. More expensive is a reasonable bet. But yeah, I'm conscious of the fact that as well as that about the Lightning cable, when Tim Cook announced the iPhone 10, I can't remember if he said it in the speech or it was just in the talk around it, but he definitely said somewhere that this would set the stage for the next 10 years worth of technology and phones. And it feels like, we don't know yet, but it looks like that is the case again. So they're pretty good at predicting this stuff, and they're also very good at killing off things before someone else can. So it's like they flipped a switch on the iPod and it vanished from the world before a rival could take it over. They're quite ruthless in a admirable kind of way.
So Apple is apparently talking about shifting how it releases iPhones, and I think this is a strategy that would mimic what Samsung does, and it would mean having the base iPhone models released in the spring and the Pro models released in the fall. So this would begin with iPhone 18, according to the rumor. This is from the information, so who knows? Probably not. But this is still an interesting thought. So iPhone 18, 18 Slim, and 18e would release in spring of 27. Now, this is where I get messed up with numbers. This fall is the iPhone 17. Next fall is the iPhone 18. So the way this would work is September 2026, 18 Pro, 18 Pro Max, and possibly some kind of folding device could release in the fall. And then in the spring of 2027, the base models 18, 18 Slim, 18e would release. What do you think of that? Is that good idea, bad idea?
My first thought of it was that this would mean, I'm getting mixed up in the years as well, so nothing changes this year, but next year, come September, then launch the flagship models, then they don't launch the base ones. That means there's no base iPhone 18 for the Christmas sales. But I've heard since that actually it's always the Pro models that sell the most at
Yes.
launch. Fits. I didn't know that. So
Through like February, like the Pro models dominate the sales charts through at least February, like all the way into the first quarter,
that almost
second
makes
quarter.
sense. Why haven't they done that before? It makes sense to split things up.
I think it's because we have more phones now. Especially if we get
True.
another Pro phone like the Folds, then it breaks it down the middle, 3 and 3.
Hmm. And Tim Cook did make a point of calling the iPhone 16e the newest member of the family in a way that just kind of implied like it's always going to be there, that there would be a 17, 18, 19e, and we don't know that. But if that always comes out in the kind of springtime, then moving the rest to it, you doubted this because it came from the information, and frankly, so you should. But it was followed up the next day by Ming Chi Kuo saying the same thing. The trouble is, actually, quite unusually for him, he was calling it a prediction. Most recently, he's been very vague about what's just his guess and what's supply chain information. But this time, he was guessing, really. So was he guessing because of the information? I don't know.
Makes
He
sense.
did disagree, actually, over which phone went where. I can't remember which way around it was, but I think he thought the Slim would go with the Pro models rather than the Fold, or some slight difference between the two sources, but I don't know.
It's an interesting idea. It gets into some weird territory though, because so the way Samsung does it is the devices they release in the spring, I believe, are the first in the rotation, and then the devices released in the fall are part of that family, whereas Apple would do fall then spring in a different order. That's why you see a lot, right? Like, I think this week as we record, so this next week, Samsung is announcing their super slim, whatever, iPhone competitor, because that's what they do. They hear what is coming down the Apple grapevine, and then they rush to make it. I know I'm only half joking because it happens every single time, so it kind of feels that way. It might be simultaneous invention, which is a thing, but simultaneous invention every time Apple does has a rumor is a little bit odd to me. Anyway, no conspiracies today, but anyway, they are announcing their super slim phone, and all the headlines are Samsung beats Apple to super slim phone, whatever. The thing is their spring phones are always their newest flagship models. It's the newest whatever Qualcomm nonsense chipset. It's the newest cameras. It has all the newest technology. So all the headlines will be, look how far ahead Samsung is. They're leaps and bounds ahead of Apple. Not ever, for whatever reason, acknowledging that this phone is the phone they would have released in the fall of 2026. I'm sorry. What year is it? 2025. This is their fall phone. If you were comparing it to Apple, Apple's competing option with the Samsung phone being announced in May of 2025, Apple is competing with that May phone with their September iPhone, right? It's always, a few months removed. And so, I feel like the headlines always get it wrong, but it's a good headline. It gets you clicks, right? That's very much how the industry has shifted at this point. That's what they do. But I just find it interesting. Now, if Apple goes the opposite route, wouldn't it be odd to say, so 2026, the fall phones come out, and it is their Pro models. And then 2027, in the spring, their base models come out, the same time frame as Samsung's new Pro models. And I think that would amplify even further, because Samsung's spring phones are the ones that are going to be competing with Apple's fall phone. So it would actually make Apple look 2 steps behind instead of 1 step behind.
Am I the only one getting dizzy over this?
This is annoying.
Yeah.
I need a calendar in front of me to explain this, but I think I laid it out correctly. It's just anyway. I don't fully understand why they would do this unless they shifted it back, flip-flopped it the other way, so they could openly compete with Samsung this identical way that Samsung does. But I don't think Apple ever actually thinks of Samsung in any way when they design or plan anything. Because a lot of people like to say, "Oh, Apple's copying Samsung." They don't even know they exist. They don't care the way Apple does business. Anyway,
one thing that helped me think this might work is that if you take out the iPhone SE or now the 16e and just stick with how it has been since the iPhone 11 Pro era. A Pro phone, 2 Pro phones, 2 non-Pro phones, all announced at the same time. It's a whole year until the next release. But for several years, somewhere in the middle, a few years ago, Apple started putting out like a mid-cycle refresh, and
color.
All it was the color, and sometimes they were very attractive colors. Sometimes they were weird colors, but if you liked them, you really liked them, and they obviously saw that there was a market there, but maybe also a need to have something new in that slot in the year, and this would give them that times 10, wouldn't it, really?
I mean, Apple would be able to own the news cycle for the whole year, in a way, especially if so Samsung plays it a little odd too, the way they do it. They release in the spring and the fall. The spring phones are their flagship phones, and then the fall phones are their lower priced models, generally with a similar spec run.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think so. Yeah. So if I'm correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm sure you're right. It just shows how little attention I pay to Samsung. I'm kind of conscious that there's been a launch, and I don't care about it, and I move on. I lose track of when it all is. But okay.
Yeah, but I think they also, because it's Samsung, they don't keep their entire line perfectly even the way Apple does. The fall ones will come about and have some new feature or some new thing, because in that time period they've got a new technology coming along, so they're not afraid to just throw it into the phone and then have a feature in the base phones that aren't available in the Pro phones, right? I don't think Apple will ever do that, but it does give them an opportunity to, technically, if they wanted to. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how Apple would handle this type of situation. Would it mean more feature updates more often, or if you're a Pro user, are you going to be jealous of the spring phones? I don't know. It'll be interesting, but
the jealousy one would only come where the Slim and the Fold go, I think, because they're they're not going to be high end, because they're too expensive to just be the form they are. But that's the one thing I could see tempting me away from the Pro models. I'm not sure, but it's possible.
I still don't even know the Fold's ever going to exist. I just can't see it.
Oh, one thing, when Ming-Chi Kuo jumped on the bandwagon, or followed the mob mentality, whichever one it is, about the Split release, he kind of casually threw in, it would have been 2027, second half, something like that, the iPhone Fold 2, and in brackets in translation, he basically said already kicked off. So it wasn't very clear, but it seemed to mean Apple's already down the line of the iPhone Fold 2. But Ming-Chi Kuo, like you've pointed out before, has been predicting a Fold every year since the iPhone began, practically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're 6 years into iPhone Fold. It's going great. I don't know what to say except, look at Eddie Q. Yes, the iPhone will still be a thing in 10 years. I can see it being on its way out in a way. We'll get into it after the show in the Plus segment, but I wanted to point out, though, if iPhone is truly going to become an accessory to something else, or evolve in a way to become something else, why introduce this new form factor at the end of its life? What's the purpose of going through? I mean, I'm glad they're experimenting internally, because this is leading to better technologies and better things, and could mean something interesting on iPhone hardware in the future. Sure. It's just the whole idea of foldables still feels like a fad. They are neat. People do buy them, or else Samsung and Google wouldn't make them every year. But it is such a small niche, such a high price, and I'm guessing lower margins because the components going into it are more expensive. It feels just like an odd thing for Apple to pursue, especially when their emphasis should be on what's next. after, like, what is the next form of technology going to be past displays and tablets? What is this AR, VR future that we're barreling towards? And a folding device solves a problem we will no longer have by the time it releases. So just odd to me. We'll see. We'll see where it goes.
I'm still more positive than you, since I can't remember which name it was. There's a Chinese phone. It was called like a trifold, but actually it's only got two folds. But phone size thing that folds out twice into a tablet size thing, and I think it's a lot thicker than it seems in the video. But the idea looked great, and since I love iPads and iPhones, I could see me going for this way. But yeah,
I'll buy a foldable if Apple came out with an iPhone fold or an iPad fold thing, like, and they could provably show that it's reliable and isn't going to just break or have a huge crease or whatever Apple does here. If they release it, I will most likely go towards that form factor, because I've mentioned on the show, I would love an iPad mini that was just my phone, right? If it could do, if it had the same cameras as my iPhone and cellular and all that stuff, and was just my phone and an iPad mini form factor, I would not have an iPhone, I would have an iPad mini. And same, so if that's where they go with this foldable and it actually works out, sure, I'll buy one. I'm not against owning one. The technology feels like a dead end. It feels like it's a solution to a problem that we had 10 years ago, which was iPhone 6. Oh no, it's getting bigger. What do we do when the iPhones keep getting bigger every year? Well, eventually they'll have to fold, right? And that's the conversation. When we were talking about iPhone 6, 12 iPhones ago. So now here we are today, and it still hasn't happened. The iPhones have gotten bigger in ways. We figured out how to do it without killing ourselves or having these overly large phones. The solution hasn't arrived in a physical form factor. It has arrived in a digital form factor. Need more screen real estate? Have an infinite screen. It's that simple. And I think that's the direction we're going, and why we could be having this discussion after the show of why iPhone might be phasing out. But why bother with a new form factor at the end?
This episode is brought to you by Oracle. There is a growing expense eating into your company's profits. It's your cloud computing bill. You may have got a deal to start, but now the spend is sky high and increasing every year. What if you could cut your cloud bill in half and improve performance at the same time? Well, if you act by May 31st, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure can help you do just that. OCI is the next generation cloud designed for every workload, where you can run any application, including AI projects, faster and more securely for less. In fact, Oracle has a special promotion where you can cut your cloud bill in half when you switch to OCI. The savings are real. On average, OCI costs 50% less for compute, 70% less for storage, and 80% less for networking. Join Modal, Skydance Animation, and today's innovative AI companies who upgraded to OCI and saved. Offer only for new US customers with a minimum financial commitment. See if you qualify for half off at oracle.com/AppleInsider. That's oracle.com/AppleInsider. And thanks to Oracle for supporting the Apple Insider Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Masterclass. Masterclass is the online training service that gets you world-class experts, famously at the top of their industries, teaching you across categories ranging from arts to cooking to business, science, technology, and more. Masterclass is very practical. You get hours of classes with these instructors, but it's also amazingly confidence building. For instance, if I've even passed you on the street, I have stopped to enthuse at you about what I've learned from Jodie Foster. Jodie Foster has a masterclass. I admired her work before, but now after it was about 4 hours of her being clever, funny, passionate, I'm an absolute fan. She treats you like an equal, and it is like getting personal, face-to-face tuition from someone brilliant. You and I would never be able to hire an instructor of that caliber. It's not just the unimaginable cost. They're doing the work they're talking about. These people are just not available. Yet they are, through Masterclass, for $10 a month, billed annually. One fee gets you everything, everyone, unlimited access to the whole streaming platform. And I realize I keep saying, you get this, but Masterclass is also a superb gift for someone else. In fact, that's how I first got to use it. A friend gave me a year's subscription as a present. And of course, right now, today, we're a pixel away from Mother's Day in the US. And so you're about 2 clicks away from giving your mum an utterly absorbing year of learning and viewing. Plus, our listeners always get great discounts on Masterclass of at least 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/AppleInsider15. See Masterclass's latest deal. Again, at least 15% off at masterclass.com/AppleInsider15. And thanks to Masterclass for those classes I've been learning from and for supporting the Apple Insider podcast.
Anyway, plenty more to talk about here today. So we have a little AI snippets here I wanted to get into before we got to Epic and Quartz and stuff. So Apple is going to be using Anthropic to help with its Xcode coding thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole story. Bloomberg has a report saying that Apple might be beefing up Swift Assist, its AI tool inside of Xcode, with Anthropic's help, which is a third party, right? Haven't seen this yet with Apple. Could be cool. I guess it would maybe be an add-on similar to ChatGPT, maybe that they would work together rather than it just taking over the entire model. But I'm interested in seeing Apple experiment with things like this.
I would have been more cynical about it because it feels like the one with Xcode. Sorry, I blanked on the name there. The Xcode one feels like auto-completing rather than anything else. But this morning, I was trying to write the simplest shortcut on my Mac, and it was failing. So I took a screen grab of it and asked ChatGPT, "What is wrong with this?" And actually, it was no use at all. It gave me a huge amount of detail, none of which was relevant or right. But while I waited for it to slowly pop out, I realised what the problem was. So it kind of helped. Didn't it?
This appears to be a screenshot of a shortcuts application on your Mac, and it has colorful cubes inside of it and ordered in a way that would suggest that it is an automation platform. Yeah, it's not going to help.
It looks at the branching of an if statement, which actually is where my problem was. I'd made a mistake in it. So, it recognised more than your harsh description there, but as it turned out, no use at all. But yes, I love the fact that I could just send it a screenshot and at least get some clues.
I've had some interesting exchanges over AI in recent days. Someone was asking, I forget her name, but she works for Wired. She's asking, like, the people who absolutely hate AI or whatever, what's your problem? Tell me. And I don't hate it personally, but I wanted to respond, and I was just like, I think it's the grifting. I think it's it's a equal and opposite reaction to the overselling, this promise that it's going to destroy humanity or whatever levels of technology, when we're actually just talking about when people are actually using it for generating images and text autocorrect and research, organizing data is the best use of AI. And I will agree with that. Data organization and retrieving data from that, as long as you can verify that it is correct retrievals, is great for this technology. Awesome. Like, if you go back and watch the film Her, what is the first thing Scarlett Johansson does? She reorganizes his file system. Right? It's so mundane. It's stupid. But honestly, that is the best use of this technology, is just taking data, understanding it better, and presenting it in a way that makes sense. Not this nonsense that it's going to change the world. And I had some AI influencer jump into the replies that I ended up blocking, saying that I'm wrong about AI. It can become sentient. In fact, it's probably already sentient, as if you were comparing it to maybe a bee or a plant. And in fact, you're ignoring all of its possible use cases. It can be used for all kinds of stuff. Like, I don't know. It went on, and I just was like, sorry, this just isn't real. This is more of that grifting and just overselling. And honestly, if people treated it like the tool it is, I think less people would hate it. And sure, ChatGPT has a lot of daily users, but
Yes.
it doesn't mean people are actually using it.
I'd be with you completely, except that thing particularly about organising information, retrieving it. Last week I would have 100% agreed with you, but as it happens, in the last few days I had occasion to say I need to do a list of books, and I couldn't be bothered to type it out, and there were the books in front of me. So I took a photograph and asked, can't remember, it was both ChatGPT and Perplexity to please just give me a list of all the books with the authors, and it did it, which was deeply impressive. But then I said sort it into alphabetical order by title, and both of them got it wrong. They were putting all the stuff under T. And in each case, you can say to them, no, that's wrong. And each time it goes, oh, you're right, I'll change it. Thank you. Well, why didn't you get it right in the first time? And then I asked Perplexity, I didn't try this with chat, but I asked Perplexity to find Amazon links for all it, because I was recommending the list to somebody, and it did an amazing job. Without me telling it to, it got the short links for Amazon US and Amazon UK, listed the lot out, and every single Amazon link didn't work. All 404.
It hallucinated.
So, yes, but every link was different and every link was wrong, and it's just the effort that went into getting it wrong is quite impressive. But,
yeah, it's very confidently wrong. So this is where it's interesting. So yes, OCR is great. It can grab that text and put it into a list, and thankfully, hopefully, it actually nothing in there was incorrect.
Yeah, it did. It made up a couple of books that sound great, actually, but okay, they were made
of
up.
Course.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, is like 80%. It's 80% of it's correct, 20% of it's wrong. So you have to go back and find out which 20% is wrong and correct it. And then once you've done that and you try to alphabetize it, it's not intelligent. This is proof it is not intelligent. Any human being, any thinking creature on Earth that understands English, so any human being, an alien, would take this information and say, "Oh, you want to alphabetize, but not with the up front." But you have to explain it further, because this is not an intelligent machine. It's a command input that requires requires you to hold its hand. So, fine, we're getting there, and I still argue we're pretty much peak AI as far as application goes. We have what it can do. Now we just need to make it do those things better. And once it does those things to a point where it's not hallucinating as much, and it's getting it, it's doing it in a way that makes sense every single time, then we're done. This technology has reached its peak, and we're already there, right? It's never going to become sentient. It's never going to do someone's job. Now, humans can use it to do their job better, but not to go on a whole tangent about AI, but I'm glad to see Apple embracing the fact that it is not the only company working on this stuff, and maybe it'll be interesting to see coders do more. I've heard of a lot of really cool stuff, like someone just saying, "Hey, ChatGPT, I need a Apple script to do this thing," and it just pops it out and it's correct.
Yeah.
Bam.
Yeah.
That's great. Or go into Xcode and say, "Look at this. It's failing at this moment. What am I doing wrong?" And it just tells you. When it doesn't hallucinate, it just tells you. So throwing in Anthropic on top of that, great. Because isn't Anthropic the one that taught ChatGPT to actually do math?
Oh, I didn't know that. That would fit. Okay.
Right, because it couldn't do math. You'd give it math and it would say 2 + 2 = fish. It just didn't work. And
now, you see, I prefer that. That's far more interesting. I've got calculators for actual maths, but okay. Right. So I blame Anthropic for the tedious accuracy of ChatGPT.
And yet,
okay,
it's still a calculator that'll get the math problem wrong 20% of the time, 30% of the time. So I still would use a calculator instead of GPT models. But anyway,
I should say that I am fine with AI tools in Xcode. Because I see them just like autocomplete, just like writing. I am really against Image Playground being in Final Cut Pro. That feels like putting in a toy into a proper application. But maybe Apple knows something better's coming. It's just, yeah.
If they don't walk out on stage at WWDC and show us some crazy Pixar-like animation levels of models, they should just trash the whole image generation thing and just replace it with GPT or something. Just say, you know what? We're not going to do that. And that's fine. Apple doesn't need to do everything. I'm glad that they went in whole hog and said, we're going to do all of the AI stuff, text, image, whatever. And now we're talking about Siri getting a chatbot next year or something. Cool. Do they need to do all of it? I don't know. Well, let's see how they improve. I'm not asking them to get rid of anything yet. This is early days, and they do work in the behind the scenes. They're not going to tell us until they're ready to tell us. Sure. I'm ready for AI to organize my health data and give me good information on that. But I'm also ready for more AI options in Safari, which appears to be something. Anyway.
I'm intrigued by that, but can't quite see what it will be yet. This episode is brought to you by Fast Growing Trees. Did you know Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the US with thousands of different plants and over 2 million happy customers? They have all the plants your yard needs, like fruit trees, privacy trees, flowering trees, shrubs, and so much more. Whatever plants you're interested in, Fast Growing Trees has you covered. Find the perfect fit for your climate and space. Now, your space is, of course, different to mine, different to everyone's, but there's also the fact that your climate is probably different too. I'm in the UK, think rain. Fast Growing Trees is for the US. So that's a bit of a problem for me and a bit of a huge advantage for you, since I can't order from Fast Growing Trees. I was going to say, but you can. Not true. Of course you can, but I actually have. I ordered a gift from Fast Growing Trees before. I ordered a gift for a friend who lives in the States. But just as you may, okay, I have a long-running gardening saga. I mean, winds, tree damage, tree felling, adding a shed, all of this. And actually all of this now as we head towards summer. So yeah, I might be mostly able to just look enviously at the range of plants available to you, except I can also look very closely at the truly excellent expert guides on the Fast Growing Trees website. I mean, the one I've been reading this time is actually, it's not our garden for once, it's the expert guide on houseplants. So there's a lot of advice here from real gardening experts on choosing the right plants and actually, possibly more importantly for me, how to take care of them when you've got them. Plus, as well as really detailed instructions on how to tend to houseplants, there's also a video on the best lighting for them. The expert guides on Fast Growing Trees covers everything, but well, they would really, because Fast Growing Trees stocks everything. Plus, this spring, they have the best deals for your yard, up to half off on select plants and other deals. And listeners to our show get 15% off their first purchase when using the code AppleInsider at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code AppleInsider at checkout. fastgrowingtrees.com, code AppleInsider. Now's the perfect time to plant. Use AppleInsider to save today. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. And thanks to Fast Growing Trees for supporting the AppleInsider podcast. This episode is brought to you by Rogue Amoeba, maker of absolutely brilliant audio tools for the Mac. If you've heard the last couple of episodes of this podcast, you may have caught Wes and I mentioning various audio problems that I've been having. I mean, the problems are all my fault, but the solutions, actually they turned out to be several, included Rogue Amoeba's Audio Hijack. Now, I've been a fan of this app for 2 decades now, and normally I just unthinkingly use it to record anything on my Mac. So, for example, earlier this week I did a couple of BBC radio appearances, and once you're booked, I just got Audio Hijack to record the station's live feed from Safari, so that when I had a moment I could listen to what have they already been saying about my topic, and then of course I recorded my own appearance. And actually I found it afterwards, Audio Hijack just transcribed my segment as well, so I could read what daft things I'd said. But the thing of that is, it's so fast and simple. I didn't think about any of it. Need to record some sound? Start Audio Hijack. There it is. I don't know what else you would use. Yet behind that speed and simplicity, there is also so much power. To fix the audio problems, right, I've been digging into Audio Hijack's other controls, like its compressor options. Now, you don't need to know how many I went through or how I got terribly sidetracked into other possibilities, but I want you to know that it was absurdly easy to try out really powerful options. Find options, find controls, drag them out from the list and just kind of line them up. I want to record my Mac. I want to record my microphone. I want to use this compressor. I want to save the audio in this format. String all of those together, hit record, forget all about it. I could go on, and in fact, I think Wes would tell you that I have. Audio Hijack it's about as close to a legend in Mac software as you can get, and it's also only one of Rogue Amoeba's many audio apps. Try all of them. They each have a fully functional trial version on the website. Plus, until the end of May 2025, you can save 20% off any purchase. Go to macaudio.com/insider to learn more, and then use the coupon code INSIDER at checkout to get your 20% discount off any purchase. macaudio.com/insider. And thanks to Rogue Amoeba for helping the AppleInsider podcast as well as supporting it.
So Eddie Q mentioning Google slacking off brought up another topic that Bloomberg mentions, that actually Apple's working on helping replace this Google with more AI chat options, or search options inside of Safari. So right now you can choose Bing, Google, DuckDuckGo, and Ecosia, I believe. Great, but you don't really have ChatGPT search as a default option. You don't have Google Gemini search, right? So they're talking about adding those as more options, and maybe Apple will have its own AI search option, which it already kind of does. It's not really working in Spotlight. I feel like Spotlight's been broken for a few months now, where it just hangs. I can type in a word and nothing happens, and then I have to close Spotlight and reopen it and search the same thing again. Then it loads results. Anyway, neat. More AI everywhere. This is going to happen. It just needs to go to the places that it makes sense. Sure, image playgrounds in Final Cut, no, but here maybe.
Can I just check, when you're using Spotlight, I take it you probably mean on your iPad or Apple Vision Pro, not the Mac. Am I right?
Yes.
All right, because on the Mac, I've long ago replaced Spotlight with Alfred 5, and there's also Launch Bar and the kind of new kid on the block that's doing amazing things, Raycast and things. Yes. All of which do pretty much everything Spotlight does, but just more and better. And I know they include some AI functions, I think at least in Raycast.
Raycast has an iPhone app now too, apparently.
Yes. All it really does is offer you a couple of quick links to things and quick access to a lot of AI models. Yeah. But it's the one, I think I said this to you last week. I asked it to count the days, and it did this thing of, well, since today is October the 10th, 202. Yeah, that kind of thing. So what it does well, it does really well, but it's necessarily different to Raycast on the Mac, which is, strictly speaking, a launcher. I was going to recommend launchers to you, but they aren't on the iPad, so ignore me.
Yeah, I mean, I've used Alfred and stuff on the Mac, so I'm familiar. It's but for whatever reason, since Apple switched on the AI particulars, and all of the deep learning stuff of, I'm going to pull this. This is old stuff, but in recent years it's gotten bogged down because it'll say, well, I'm going to deep search your recipe app, and if you search for casserole in Spotlight, it'll find in the recipe app the recipe for that casserole and give you a direct link to it in that app, right? So, and that's been a thing for a while in Spotlight, but for whatever reason, that combined with Safari search, combined with Wikipedia results, combined with, just everything, seems to be just completely hanging it up, and they need to figure out how to fix that. But
this feels like it fits in with Siri being worse, because I know we've talked about it before and you've not had problems, but yesterday I could have wept. I was asking my HomePod Mini, my iPhone, and my Apple Watch, all of them, any of them, please. I was set an alarm for 9 a.m. called Writers Guild, and over it's, I can't find the alarm you're asking for. But I'm not asking for it, just over and over. And in the end, I said, alarm, 9 a.m., and then changed the name to Guild stuff. And this is the stuff you used to be able to do all the time, and now you can't. So all very frustrating. But
yeah, Spotlight's its own thing, separate from Siri, but honestly, that might be part of the problem. I think that we've heard discussions of Apple unifying Siri and Spotlight at some point. I would love it if I hit Command Space and it brought up the Siri type to Siri prompt.
Oh, actually, Sorry, I've got to ask you about this. The number of times in the last 2 weeks that I've been working away on the Mac and up has popped the type to Siri thing. And I'm thinking, what key did I accidentally press? But I don't know what key brings that up. I keep doing it. Yeah.
If you hold down, so what is it? Command, Control, Function. I think it's the Control key. It opens dictation or Siri. It's one of those keys.
Right.
Okay, yeah, it's like a default command somewhere in the system, or some app set it up where if you hold down that key, it automatically goes to whichever it is. If you're in drafts, it'll open dictation. If you're in an app that has no dictation, it'll just trigger Siri. I believe that is a shortcut.
Thank you.
So moving on, we don't have a controversy corner this week because we have the standard controversy instead of political controversy. So, I did want to mention briefly before we get to Epic stuff. Florida had I think it's a Republican Congresswoman. Her name is escaping me because it's kind of hard to say. Comac or something like that. Kamak? Anyway, she has put out this thing called the App Store Freedom Act. Sure, if you guys read this story, it's basically they copied and pasted the DMA and said if you are an app store with more than 100 million users, so Apple and Google, I guess, you have to allow third-party stores on your platform. You can't bar them from external purchases or external linking. You have to allow them to use third-party payment platforms if they feel like. So basically, allow external app stores, allow sideloading, and allow them to avoid Apple's fees entirely. So everyone gets to go operate on Apple's platform free of charge kind of bill. And it's never going to make it out of litigation. They'll vote no and it'll move on. I just wanted to point out its existence because we've seen a few of these already and they never make it anywhere. It's going to take like actual Congress introducing something like this, not a state level legislature. So fun.
I'm bothered by the fact that there's this presumption that Apple is like a utility company, like water, that everybody should have it. Apple built the App Store, built the devices that have sold 1 billion. So to require them to give away everything for nothing, I mean, it's just...
Well, I made this comment in my most recent article. So I wanted to get into just what's happened in the last week with Epic. And then I have a couple of topics at the end of the show here I want to get to. So let's not take too long. I just want to go down the list. This is what's happened since. So basically, as we recorded last week, the evening before this whole thing came down, Apple's in contempt of court, injunction, the failure to follow the injunction violation, a willful violation of the injunction ruling, must stop policing apps on whether or not it can link out or allow purchases externally without drawing any commissions, must stop all of that, basically. Epic said, great, we're going to bring Fortnite back if you do that globally. Apple didn't do it globally, and then Tim Sweeney said, guess what, we're going to still bring Fortnite back for some reason. I guess he just really wants it back on the App Store because iPhone owners are really lucrative, and right now he can do it and make all the money without paying Apple a dime. So we'll get to that in a second. Since then, Spotify updated their app, Kindle, a couple of others, I think Match Group got in on this, have updated their apps to basically bypass Apple entirely and allow them to make money while operating on Apple's platform without paying any commission. And so Apple filed their appeal, and then they filed a stay request, which we'll get to in just a second. But I did want to mention, in all of this mess, someone filed a lawsuit, a developer of a basketball training app, the Sweat something. Did I mention this last? This must have happened right after we recorded. So this basketball app developer filed a class action lawsuit saying that all 160,000 developers on Apple's platform lost money in the last year because they could not link outwardly, and they're seeking recompense by taking all of Apple's profits of the App Store and distributing it to developers for the last year. So cool. That's not going to happen.
You think? Okay.
No. Yeah, that's just, there's no legal precedent. There's no way that's going to happen. Anyway, so what do you think of all this nonsense, William? And then we can get to the details.
The specifics of Apple built this. I think Apple certainly was trying to try one on with the 27% and affiliate link earnings and stuff, but give their hard work away for free. That seems wrong. But then we get things like you mentioned Kindle. Kindle has added in they call it rather than buy the book, they've added get book. So previously you had this nonsense that you could browse on the Kindle app on the iPhone. You could even get samples of the books, but you couldn't actually buy unless you came out of that app and went into the separate Amazon app, also on the iPhone. And to get rid of that kind of nonsense seems fine. Although I can't tell you how long I spent, because instead of buy, they've said get book. The amount of time I spent trying to find a headline that was get book back to where it once belonged. And I don't really know that I succeeded, but I had another go there. So thank you for that opportunity. I resent. Isn't it awful? Obviously, Apple is one big corporation, Amazon's another, Spotify's another. They're all the same in so many ways. But we have had things in the past where Spotify has been saying that Apple won't allow it on the store, and Apple is bad and horrible. And the truth is, no, Apple's welcome them on the store. You just have to pay what everybody else pays. So that kind of we're the underdog suffering, even though we're the market leader and all this, that bothers me. And so there's a lot of crowing, I think, about having got this victory so far that seems very petty.
The question is, and I think the crux of this whole conversation is, does Apple deserve money for running an app store and distributing apps? Does it deserve to make money off of the apps that are people install on their iPhone? Do they deserve to make money when people use those apps to make purchases related to those apps? Like, and then you start getting into the finer cuts of when should they make money and when shouldn't they make money. But as a top-down view, does Apple deserve to make money off of the App Store and the apps that are installed and the in-app purchases that occur on those apps?
Yes, they've created this entire new market. So how much, I don't know, but yeah.
It seems that the judge is against that. Now, I don't know. So this has been tried in court many times and failed. This is the one time we've seen it almost completely upend itself. So let's do some history, because Renee Ritchie actually reminded me of this on Blue Sky. I saw him post about it, talking to John Gruber. Why do we have this in the first place? So the App Store arrived. They monetized it, right? 30% cut. And then in-app purchases came about. So at first, Apple didn't allow in-app purchases on free apps, period. Remember? If you were going to have an in-app purchase, I think you already had to be a paid app. I can't remember the exact thinking here, but it was basically, we don't want people to think they're getting a free app and then find out 2 minutes later they have to pay $8, right? So you pay into an app and then you buy upgrades, and that usually meant just games, right? You're buying tokens or something. And so Apple did this to kind of prevent people gaming the system, and because then everyone would go free, convincing people to download the app, and then, oh, actually you need to give us money. And turns out once Apple opened that up to give free apps access to in-app purchases, people more or less understood. There's still, to this day, reviews on apps that says, I thought this was free, but then I opened it and it charged me. Sure, human nature, never going to end. But anyway, so Apple kind of coached developers on how to approach this, and I think it worked out going in that order, saying, no, actually, don't try to screw over your people. Having paid apps is good. Now, to be fair, a lot of apps on the App Store are gets now. They're all free with a subscription or in-app purchase. It's everywhere. But there are still upfront paid apps. They do exist. And then on top of that, Apple created the commission and the they structured this in-app payment system because it was the only way they were ever going to make services revenue on any of this. Otherwise, why bother? The only other way they were going to make money is if they created a artificial teeth, right? And just said, okay, you have to report to us your sales, and then we're going to tell you how much you owe. It's kind of like the IRS. And Apple did not want to do that. So they just said, oh, the easiest way to do this is to use the in-app purchase flow. And then we control that, and it's safer for customers because random app X is not going to get your payment info. It was a win-win. And everyone agreed until the commission, right? At first it was like 30%. Man, great. PlayStation charges me 60. Cool. Until a few years later, 30%, that's too much. You got to lower it. And they negotiate. We get it down to 50% in some instances, and regulators step in. Things change. Apple still gets its money. But now it's gotten to the point where we're talking about, actually, if you just want to not pay Apple any money at all, except for the $100 annual fee, there's now a way to do that. And that just seems wrong, right?
I remember developers who've been around for a long time. One of them was telling me they were totally fine with 30% because when they used to sell software through boxes, they would be lucky for them to get even 30% of the retail price.
13%.
Yeah, it's just so
left, not paid left. That's what they get back is 13%. So, and I want to point, and this isn't me trying to pick fights, but look at the companies doing this that were ready to do it right away. Spotify, Epic's running the charge. Epic created a entire school on how to do this to teach other developers how to bypass Apple's commissions. And of course, Riley Testut's fine. I love Delta. He jumped on it to get Patreon in there and do certain things. I don't think he's actually being particularly nefarious. I think his business model actually makes sense to have external purchases and Patreon stuff like that. That's one of the few examples of where it works out, that there should be in-app purchase and external purchase, and there should be a balance and a choice by customers. But then these other companies just dived on it because they just don't want to pay anything. And that troubles me, right? Me as a user, I don't want to open drafts and then him say, well, if you want the pro subscription, go to this website and give me your credit card information. I don't want to do that. And I'm frankly not going to. I personally would delete the app and find something else that uses Apple's payment system. And thankfully the apps that I use haven't jumped on this. And it seems that Apple is asking for a stay, which I don't know how that's going to work, because if they get the stay, which means they don't have to do this until the appeal is over, do they go back and say, sorry, Spotify, revert your app or you're getting kicked off the App Store?
The judge actually explicitly said that she would not consider a request for a stay because of Apple's previous behaviour on this. So I don't understand.
Sure.
Maybe it's just a form thing that they have to. If they didn't request it, there'd be some issue further down the line. But I don't
trying
think
anyway.
Get it. But
no, it's not going to happen. But this is just Apple has all the money in the world. I get it.
Yes.
They're not the little guy, but it's still just. I made the joke on Blue Sky of, hey guys, did you hear about this really big parking lot? It has 1 billion people in it waving money around, and all you have to do is go set up a tent and they'll hand it to you free of charge, right? That's where we are. Apple built a business, and it's a very successful business. And yeah, there are arguments to be made. Maybe they charge too much, or they're doing it the wrong way, or they need to make more concessions to people who have 5,000 users versus 500 million users, right? You gotta have more boundaries, more rules. I think if Apple actually wants to run this app store, they need to have more granularity, more oversight, right? I'm of the mind that App Review should be a third-party company. Maybe it would be a company run by Apple. That's fine. But it should be able to operate externally, separate from Apple, under a different umbrella. And that way, it can do independent verification and not be bogged down by bureaucracy, hopefully. Anyway, I'm just saying, like, there's ways to do this, but saying, hey, Apple, you can't make any money on this because it just doesn't make sense, right? Apple should not be making money off of the shirt you buy on Amazon, no. But they should be making money on the skins you buy in Fortnite. That's fair.
Do you remember back at the first year of the iPhone and there was no App Store, Steve Jobs was insisting there's this fantastic thing. You can all do web apps and things and that'll be fine for you. And it was the rest of Apple that convinced him. If he were around now, would he be saying, see, was it worth the trouble? I don't know, but...
Well, so this is where it gets complicated. What Florida is asking for, alternative app stores, right? Epic wants an app store on iPhone, not because it wants to do it so it can sell its apps and draw a commission from every app. It wants to do what Apple's doing. That's it.
Yeah.
And maybe there is something to be said to that. Maybe that's the path to regulation of competition, of saying, okay, Apple, have your in-app purchase system. Say, if you develop an app for Apple's App Store, you cannot link externally and you must pay us 30%. And then allow Epic to have an app store to say you can link externally, but also you have to give us 30%. Like, sure, if that's the kind of competition that Apple needs, maybe that's what regulators need to pursue. We're in weird territory here. Nobody knows what's happening or where this is going. It's just, there has to be a solution that doesn't involve everyone living in Apple's property rent-free. It doesn't make sense. Apple should be able to, because this is what's going to happen, William. That $100 annual fee is going to become $1,000. That's it.
A good point. Yes, easily. Yes.
And that's how Apple's going to get some of its money back. It's never going to be able to recoup all of its money because it made billions of dollars off of the App Store.
There was actually Morgan Stanley, the investment bank, sent a note to its investors, which AppleInsider saw a copy of, working out some figures on it and how big or small this company's analysts believe the problem is. And one of their arguments, they said that in the worst case, if Apple loses, if every user goes to direct linking instead of paying through Apple, Apple could raise the prices of all its other services by 5% and completely wipe out the difference.
Sure. It's for Apple, it's a small number. They could add the price of the iPhone. They could add the price of the developer fee. They could add, there's a lot of ways they could maneuver this, but it's not that Apple's in any danger, right? This isn't the end of the world scenario. The question, it's more of a philosophical one. What happens when you become Apple and you build this ecosystem and you create this entire world of people who bought an expensive iPhone, so they generally spend money on the App Store. They are very lucrative customers. Does Apple not get to benefit from doing that? That is the question. And I think the answer to that is they should. Now, how they benefit from it, at first, the commission made sense. Maybe it doesn't make sense now. Maybe Apple does need to become the IRS. I don't know. I'm not a regulator. But at some point, this judge especially needs to at least concede that maybe Apple doesn't need to make 30% off of every single purchase. Maybe that's a step too far. But maybe that if they're going to use that entitlement, they need to pay some kind of fee or some kind of smaller percent of their annual income, just something, because you shouldn't be able to just walk into Walmart, open a stand at the front door next to the greeter, and sell pumpkins for $5 less than Walmart's asking price, right? Whatever it may be. It's just undercutting the business that is giving you business. It just sounds like cheating. It sounds improper. And there has to be solution. There has to be. So we have two more small topics here. I wanted to point out Apple did announce the Pride collection. So the new sports band this year looks great. The last couple of years, it was a woven fabric band. And they've done a sport loop where you had to have a measurement. Honestly, I'm kind of happy to be back to this sport band again because you don't have to have a measurement. You just order the thing. It looks fun. I like it. I like the geometric patterns.
Did you see? I saw that it was out. I was glad that it was there. It looks great, but I didn't realise that about the loop. That makes a difference. I'm with you on that one. I'm quite tempted now.
Yeah, so my fiance and I, we made a trip to an Apple store. Our closest one is 2 hours, specifically to make sure we bought the right size loop the last 2 years. So this year we can just order it online and it arrives. So that's great. But
well, you don't have the fun of the 4 hours in the car chatting away. It's a death of communication.
Right. I'm sure we'll visit that town at some point, but we don't need to wait to get our bands.
No. Okay.
And finally, I wanted to also the Pride wallpapers are all coming out in 18.5, which is next week. Yay! So as you listen in the next few days, you will get 18.5, which is a very empty update.
Yes.
There's no you can tell they were clearly expecting to have a bunch of AI stuff to do, and it just, everything got pushed out.
It's the same with macOS 15.5. It feels like just sort of tidying it up before announcing 16, but yeah.
One last thing that you won't be interested in.
Okay.
I reviewed the Backbone Pro, and this is cool.
Right.
So
I don't know what that is. I'm sorry.
All right, so Backbone 1 came out in 2020 as I call it a wraparound controller. Some people call them like sandwich style controllers. Basically, you put your phone in the middle and it squeezes it like a
it's
a
a game thing, isn't it? Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's a game controller. It kind of turns your phone into what you would call like a Nintendo Switch-esque thing, maybe a PSP, whatever analogy you want to use. All this stuff. It's a fun idea. Bit expensive. But in the last 2-3 years, game controllers have lowered in price. These style, I reviewed 2 weeks ago a game controller that was $35 that does the wraparound thing, right? And attaches to iPad mini. So it felt like this ecosystem was really evolving, really growing. And I was wondering what Backbone was going to do next. And they sent me their preview for this. Everything about it's great, but it costs $170. Going from reviewing a $35 controller that fits iPad mini to a $170 controller that does not, that only fits iPhone, it smacked me in the face a little bit. And I was looking at this thing externally. It is actually an ergonomic dream. They apparently, I talked a little bit with some of them, they apparently did like 9,000 different prototypes and scanning human hands as people use these controllers, trying to find the perfect ergonomic balance for this size and form factor. And the reason why they didn't include iPad, they could have easily stretched it a little bit more, is the weight distribution and everything they planned for was for iPhone. If they had to include the iPad in that, it would have upended everything. I get it. They didn't want to target it. But what's interesting about this controller that other controllers did not do is they included batteries and Bluetooth. So when you're not using this as an iPhone controller, you can pair it to your iPad, Mac, Vision Pro, your television, right?
Yeah.
So that's great. But what's even cooler, so they actually took it a step further, is if you use this controller, you can use it Bluetooth powered on without the phone connected. But if you connect your phone to it and go to the Backbone app, you have a Bluetooth selection menu. So it will remember every device you've ever connected to, and you can hot swap between them and select from a menu which device you're connecting to. And that way you don't have to repair every single time, which is something you have to do with every other controller on the planet, except for this one. And it has a software menu for it, which is really cool. $170, hard to justify, but otherwise, excellent build, excellent controller. I loved it.
Are they going to continue selling the non-pro version?
Yes, at $100.
Right. Oh, okay. So you have some choices. I can't believe I'm going to ask this, but I've got to check. You said they made it for the iPhone, but iPhones come in different sizes. Does it fit on all iPhones?
Yes. It stretches to fit all the iPhones, and it, of course, works with Android because it's USB-C. So this is where it gets tricky. My review did get 3 stars. If money was no question, it would be a 4.5. review. And the reason why it still isn't a perfect score is the Backbone app. I know we don't need to spend a lot of time on this in the show because I don't know how many people listening care, but I just wanted to say this was just a really fun device. Overall, the reason why it got 3 stars is because I have to write for the people reading it, and $170 is a lot of money.
I can't work out what $170 is in pounds, but I can tell you that I just spent £189 buying a Kobo Libra Color for my wife, and I deeply regret it because now I want it. It's so nice.
Oh, well, so the price I did want to explain briefly, and I mentioned this in the review. It bakes in the uncertainty with tariffs. So Xbox actually,
right.
Yeah. So right. Xbox actually just raised prices of everything, including the Xbox console. The Elite controller that was $170 is now $200. PlayStation hasn't touched its prices yet, but I'm sure it will.
This is normally the point of the show when we would check in with each other about how people can reach us. But I think in your case, don't bother. He's playing a game. He'll never notice anything. Is that fair?
I try to play, man. Life is so busy. I wish I could play more. And one last mention. So we don't really have any reviews this week. A couple of repeat reviews keep showing up. I'm just going to mention here, I'm not going to read the repeat reviews where you guys just keep trashing us and like resubmitting the review over and over. Like, I'm not going to read that. That's just silly. You got better things to do, guys. If you don't like the show, don't listen. Anyway, we did get a really good email. Actually, a couple of times I forgot to respond. So this is the second time we got this email from Parker. And they've suggested we talk about Open Core Legacy Patcher. I was going to squeeze this into the iMac section earlier, and I completely forgot. But it's this really cool system of where you can basically go back on an old Mac, like a 2012, 2010 Mac of some sort that is way out of date, that is not getting updated to the latest Mac OS. But the Open Core Legacy Patcher lets you actually install modern operating systems on there, just without maybe some of the compatible features. And I wanted to mention it because I've actually seen this running in real life. Our local flea market has a Mac seller, but it's not a modern Mac seller. They sell old refurbished Macs, and I've seen really, really old Macs running macOS Sequoia. So it works. It's neat.
I went to Hey On My a couple of weekends ago. It's a Booktown, sort of Wales, England area there, and there was a technology shop that was using a 27-inch iMac as just a sign outside its door, but not even switched on. It was just like a front for them to stick pieces of paper on, and it was so sad to see it. But otherwise, great time. Yeah.
So this listener did have a question, and I think we can answer it pretty briefly because I know we're running long. Sorry, guys. Controllers excite me. So if older computers can run the newest OS through this Open Core Legacy Patcher, why is Apple dropping them so quickly? Is it because they really just want to push the Apple Silicon message and say, you don't need Intel, come over here? Or is it, is there another reason going on behind the scenes that we're just not seeing?
Isn't there a security issue with really old software that maybe Apple isn't updating?
I think this is multi-tiered. So just because a computer can run the operating system doesn't always mean it's going to run it well. And a lot of times it's stripping out a lot of the stuff that makes the newer operating system new. It's basically a skin at that point. You're disguising your Mac OS X something with Mac OS Sequoia Paint, but in reality, you're not actually running the Core ML frameworks that make the modern Macs as powerful and as fast as they are in certain aspects. You're not able to access Apple Intelligence. Not really. I mean, you could run it. I think there's a way to hack your way into doing that. We've seen Apple Intelligence run on an iMac G4. It took them a month to do something, but it works. But just because you can do something, it doesn't always mean it's a good idea. And I think Apple's cutoff, it has something to do with Apple Silicon, but not because there is financial incentive, but it's not just that. It's also efficiency. If they want to support these older systems, developers are then left looking at these older systems thinking,
good point.
I have to support this 15-year-old computer with my modern app. So Apple's actually also looking at app support, telling developers actually it's okay if you cut off support for this operating system because it's so old that you don't need to worry about it anymore. And there's just multiple factors here. There's also so many new features require M series processors. And the whole reason why it's macOS Sequoia in the first place is because of those M series specific features. So to run macOS Sequoia on those Intel machines, you're not actually running Apple's version of macOS Sequoia in the way that they intended. So there's a lot of decision making going on here. I don't think they're being unfair. And honestly, their support is incredible. And I'm still interested in seeing how long it takes before we drop the M1 off the bottom. It could be years.
Hopefully so. But there we go. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know what that was when we got the email for it. So I learned something there. Thank you. Okay.
All right. So again, sorry for running long. We try to keep these to a tight hour, but sometimes it just, life. There's a lot
you
to
get
talk
obsessed
about.
with things, don't you? With me, it's keyboards and things and video editing. With you, it's games. And I love hear the enthusiasm for it. You almost convinced me to start playing games, but
Right.
not quite.
You should play Minecraft, William.
Yeah, I do Sudoku. that works. Okay.
But thanks again, everyone, for listening. You can always reach me at Blue Sky. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We've seen some. I think they always get shuffled around in a weird way. Like, I don't know if y'all, where I visit every week, I see how Apple manipulates these things. They like move them around in different orders. So sometimes your reviews just disappear entirely, or they're in different spots, and it's hard to determine exactly which ones we've covered. I've seen people talking about audio, but all the audio ones are dated before last week's episode when we fixed the audio, which I listened back. William, you did great. I think we're good now. So hopefully those complaints aside, I hope that's all fixed now. Feel free to go back and update your reviews to be 5 stars. Not that their audio is fixed, but
let's do an experiment. If Apple is gaming this in some way for all podcasts, how about people only give us 5-star reviews for a couple of months and see how that affects the order.
There we go.
It's a science experiment. Okay.
Yeah. So thanks again for, as always, for sending us emails, for leaving reviews, for talking to us on social media. We appreciate it. And William, where can people bug you on the internet?
Well, this week, weirdly, I often mention my 58 Keys channel on YouTube. It's specifically for writers who use Mac gear like us. But this week, I've done one on Hazel for Mac, and the numbers just zooming up, which is on most ways brilliant. But it also happens to be that this week I made the worst YouTube poster I've ever made, and all these people are now looking at it. So part of me wants to say, please come have a look, and part of me says, yeah, don't. The video's all right. The poster's awful. What about you?
Just same as always, Blue Sky. I'm still doing my weekly posts in my blog, which is about to cost me $200. So, gosh, okay. Paying for Hover and a domain and Ghost, it's
yeah.
But I like doing the little blog thing. I do need to come up with more posts. I'm thinking about trying to do like a buy me a coffee thing. Just maybe I can offset the $200 a year, even if someone gives me like $5 or something. But anyway, yeah, y'all can send me an email, wes@appleinsider.com. Always happy to hear from you. And yeah, just talk to me on Blue Sky. And that's it for our show this week. Thanks again for listening. Again, apologies for going maybe a little long, but if y'all are still here and you are paid Apple Insider Plus subscribers, you will hear the after show. Of course, Apple Insider Plus, you get the show ad-free and its own little stream in Apple Podcasts. And the after show this week, we will be discussing what does a world without iPhone actually mean? What does that look like? How do we get there? And everyone else, want to just say thank you to our sponsors, Oracle, Masterclass, Fast Growing Trees, and Rogue Amoeba. Oh, that's a mouthful today, but hey, thanks for being here for the show, and thank you guys for listening. Talk to you next week.